if you could all put yourself on mute as well and stay muted for the presentation, that would be fantastic. Wonderful. So welcome to this Meet the Funders Taster Workshop with an environmental focus. So this workshop is being delivered by us. So we're Warwickshire Community and Voluntary Action, and we are very lucky to have some speakers from ENTRUST, Heart of England, Warwickshire County Council, Veolia, the National Lottery Community Fund and Severn Trent Community Fund as well, who you'll hear from in just a moment. So as I just said, please remain muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, we will give you the opportunity to contribute through the chat, or if you'd like to, you can hold on to those and we will have a question section at the end. And there may be opportunities to ask questions during the presentation as well. It's being recorded. It's fantastic to see your faces if you're happy to do so. But if not, you're more than welcome to turn your camera off. The slides will be shared with you after the session as well. So they'll be with you shortly after. So we're the community and we're Warwickshire Community and Voluntary Action. So we are the local infrastructure organisation for Warwickshire and Solihull. And we provide services across funding, group development and volunteering to non-for-profit organisations. So from community organisations, charities, social enterprises and the like. We work across Warwickshire and Solihull. So this is including offices in Atherstone, Nuneaton, Rugby, Leamington Spa, Stratford upon Avon and Solihull. And as a couple of the team members have already introduced themselves, there are more of us, believe it or not, in each of these localities, but I'll share the contact details for your relevant team who'll be able to support you with anything spanning volunteering, funding and governance and group development. So that is us. Just quickly before I jump into the other speakers at this session, I'm just going to share a little bit about the State of the Sector Survey, which we've currently got open. It's our fourth State of the Sector Survey. And the main focus of this is to evaluate where we are now and what has influenced us to get to this position in the voluntary sector. So how the last year and a half has changed the organisation, any challenges that you're facing and how we can support you in the future for ourselves, providing services and also for stakeholders in the wider sector as well. So here's some information that was found in the last State of the Sector Survey. So this is all sorts of statistics surrounding how many organisations were established, the reduction of organisations' level of free reserves, relationships with the public sector, risk of closure, increase in demand for services and things of the like, which we imagine we will see a significant change in due to the impacts of the pandemic. So just a few stats. We organisations worked with around 600 beneficiaries prior to this this past year or since the last survey, and we anticipate that will change. So we're looking to see how this has been impacted by the last 18 months and beyond, as well as the financial pressures, whether this still applies. Your teams, whether your amount of volunteers has changed. We saw a big boost in sort of mutual aid support over the pandemic, and whether there's been a legacy of this support as people have been returning to work, and whether you still have that level of volunteer engagement or how we can help you maintain that volunteer engagement in the future. So by filling out this survey, you'll help us to understand this, help us understand how we can support your organisation due to changes in funding, increased or more complex demand on services and changes in workforce. And your contribution will help us do the best work that we can to support this, the voluntary sector across Warwickshire and Solihull for the next period before the next one. So as well as this, you can become a CAVA member to stay up to date with the support that we offer and to really get the greatest benefit out of the free services that we provide, including these here. You can read those when I share the slides. I'm eager to get going, but these are all the things that we provide, and there's also a link to sign up as a member as well as our Eventbrite page and subscribing to our newsletter. So there are 3 things that I'd really recommend if you're a voluntary community organisation or social enterprise who are looking to make the most of what we can provide for free across Warwickshire and Solihull. So that is the gist of it. There's the contact information for all of us that will be shared with you at the end as well. So that is my bit for now. And without further ado, I am going to pass on to Warwickshire County Council. Are you there? Matt, are you there?
Yep, hiding.
There you are. Hi. Hi, Matt.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm used to sharing my screen on Teams. Hopefully it's pretty much the same on Zoom. So hopefully everyone can see that now. It's a presentation there.
Yeah, we've got that. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. So this is about the Green Shoots Community Grant Scheme. It's a scheme that opened in February this year, and this was about meeting a need for the county in terms of accelerating work to tackle climate change, securing the involvement of communities, upskilling capacity and connecting local networks, and trialling innovative and efficient modes of project delivery. So launched in February, by the end of May, we received 110 applications and a huge amount, £1.3 million worth of funding applications. So overwhelming number of applications. We couldn't fund them all, so we went through a detailed process of evaluation. So towards the end of July, we then funded 69 applications for £325,000. Okay, so we wanted projects to have and to demonstrate an impact on carbon reduction and climate resilience or adaptation, to have a beneficial environmental impact, and also show, what crucially as well, benefits for the community and community involvement. The projects, in terms of our evaluation, they need to be compliant with the scheme to meet those kind of outcomes. They needed to have benefits which met those outcomes. They need to be deliverable, so they needed to show that they had a team in place, that we were confident that could deliver the project from inception to the end, and they needed to demonstrate good value for money. We weren't going to fund internal staff costs, although we recognised there were people that needed to be in place to deliver the project. We wouldn't fund feasibility studies, as we wanted a tangible outcome after the funding, and also where they wouldn't get permissions, so such as connection to the distribution network, say for a solar project, or planning permission. A whole range of different types of projects that were funded, including ecology and trees, renewables, training on awareness, electric vehicle charging points, and some projects on active travel. There's a web link at the bottom there. We've got a complete list of projects that were funded. Okay, so I've got some examples of some fantastic projects that are now up and running or ready to be launched. So just a few examples here. So I want to start with a particularly low cost, high value project. So we've provided, it's not that slide at all. That one. We provided £800 to grow a repair cafe in Kenilworth. So it's the focal point for items to be repaired and reused. They meet monthly at the United Reformed Church, and the concept is that personal and portable items can be brought for repair to extend their useful life and avoid them entering the waste system and potentially landfill. The cafe also aims to foster an awareness of environmental issues by creating a repair culture rather than that of discard and replace. We also really like the benefits of community building, volunteering opportunities, and skills development. The next project in Radford Samili is to fund the planting of 2,600 trees over 4 acres of land in a children's forest at Laistow Farm. So this was £25,000, but we thought it particularly deserved that maximum grant as it hits many of the benefits and planned outcomes that we're looking for. So local children were involved in planting the trees, along with other members of the community. So key is that trees are maintained for 30 years using the grant funds. So there are some significant benefits, not least an estimated 2,600 tonnes of carbon offset projected over a 100-year tree lifetime, but also an awareness and engagement, especially of the young, the strengthening of the local community links, and physical and mental well-being. So next one. So turning to a project on efficient buildings, the Village Hall in Wixford has received a grant of just over £24,000 as part of a much larger project they're delivering. Current Village Hall is dilapidated and not fit for use. So a modern steel structure surplus to requirements from a building project at Oversley Castle of a very similar size is being donated and re-erected in place of the existing hall. Materials from the current hall are being reused, and we're funding some of the building services and insulation measures, which in itself is of great benefit. The part of the project the Green Shoots are funding will allow them to replace their pre-existing inefficient heating system of bottled gas and an open fire with an air source heat pump, a heat recovery ventilation system, and high-grade insulation and air tightness measures. They anticipate a huge 83% reduction in CO2 emissions for each hour of use compared to the prior building. And it's great having these types of figures at the point of agreeing a project is great, as it allows us as a way of going back after the hall has been in use for a while to determine if we've got what we paid for. The final project I want to mention is at Myton Hospice in Warwick. They provide inpatient end-of-life at-home care to patients in Rugby, Warwick and Leamington. This is to fund both electric vehicle charging points at their hospice and LED lighting at their charity shop to total £4,700. They've already got 3 electric vehicles for their at-home staff and will now be able to charge them on site, as well as providing the facility at nominal charge to staff, visitors and the community. Additionally, the lighting will be improved and modernised. That will be delivering energy and carbon savings at their charity shop. So of the funding offered, we did though have an uneven spread across the county, with 65% of the funds provided to projects operating in Warwick and Stratford districts, with only 35% funding projects in the north, mainly the Rugby district. This was a reflection of the proportion of applications received. We are looking to run a scheme in 2022, but haven't yet made any decisions on the scope yet. However, I would very much encourage more involvement from community organisations based in the north, as there really are significant benefits, as I hope you'll see from the project examples given. Thanks so much. If you've got any questions, happy to answer them.
Fantastic, thanks Matt. If you have any questions for Matt, you're welcome to ask him, or you can put those in the chat, and we can make sure to either answer them ourselves or to share them with Matt to answer those for him. That's fantastic. It's wonderful to hear a bit about the benefit of green shoots across Warwickshire, and fantastic. I've just seen Jill's put in the chat about how Hillmont and East Rugby together secured a grant from the green shoots as well. So that's wonderful to hear. So thank you, Matt.
Okay, thanks so much for having me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations today.
Thanks, Matt. Fabulous. So moving on to our next speaker, we are going to hear from Simon at ENTRUST.
Excuse me, thank you very much. Excuse me, sorry, I have also got a little bit of a cold cough this morning, so apologies for any noises I make, but bear with me. I'll just start to share my screen. So hopefully you can all see, let me just make it into proper size. So hopefully you can all see that PowerPoint screen. Excellent. Yes, so in the 10 minutes I have, I just hope to give you an introduction to the Landfill Communities Fund, a bit about finding funding in the scheme, and also what the scheme actually funds. We have an actual LCF funder coming up next. That's Lizzie, who I know. In terms of ENTRUST, we are the regulator of the scheme, so we don't actually distribute any money ourselves. So in terms of your relationship with us, if you investigate the LCF, we are just the regulator, and the money will come from other parties, which I shall hopefully explain in this presentation. So brief introduction, sorry, excuse me, to the Landfill Communities Fund. So Landfill Tax was introduced in 1996. And as part of the introduction of this tax, obviously a tax on waste going to landfill with the policy aim of reducing waste going down that route to encourage recycling. That was the aim at the time. A small percentage of landfill tax was allowed to be diverted from the landfill operator to directly to environmental projects near the landfill site. So normally, obviously, when a landfill operator would pay their landfill tax to HMRC, like we all do, they would just pay that direct. And landfill tax is about £100 a tonne now, roughly, on each tonne of waste going to landfill. So a very small portion of the overall tax bill can go directly to community projects. And this roughly is about 5% each year of a total landfill tax liability. So landfill tax itself is a huge amount of money going direct to central government, and then a small amount could be bypassed directly to in community and environmental projects. The value of the scheme is about, it changes each year. In this year, 21-22, it's about 34.4 million anticipated value of the scheme. And that's based on landfill operators contributing their 5% of the landfill tax liability. So when landfill when the landfill operator gives their money out to these projects, they get 90% back as a tax credit from HMRC. So it's 90% funded by a tax credit, which is why there is a regulator, which is why we exist, because it is a tax credit scheme, so we regulate how the money is spent. And the original landfill tax regulation set out who can receive the money, how the money can be spent, and a few other bits and bobs about reporting. So that's an overview of the process. So the landfill operator that generates the money, they give it to an environmental body, of which there's some differences on who that can be, and then they dish it out to the projects. So just so you know, just to clarify who we are, so we regulate the LCF on behalf of HMRC. We check that organisations applying to enrol as environmental bodies meet the requirements of the regulations. Most people actually receiving money from the scheme don't need to enrol with us. The word environmental body, just to clarify this, that's just the name of an organisation enrolling with us, but it could be a cricket club, it could be a conservation body, it could be a PCC, it could be a church, it could be anyone. That's just a term from the regulations. And if the regulations are written again, we've learned lots of lessons over the last 20 years, and we would change the scheme in some ways, but it is what it is. We check the LCF money spent compliantly, we check it up front, and we check it at the end through compliance inspections. We ourselves are a not-for-profit organisation funded by a £100 enrolment fee and a levy on all money entering the scheme. Just to clarify, the scheme is England and Northern Ireland. It used to be whole of UK, but Scotland and Wales now do their own scheme. So how do you actually get money from the scheme? So there's two ways of actually receiving money from the LCF. So you either get it from an organisation that distributes money on behalf of a landfill operator. So these are called distributive environmental bodies, of which they tend to be partnered with their landfill operator. So Suez landfill operator gives its money out through Suez Communities Trust, which is an environmental body, and so on and so forth. And obviously we have Veolia here today, Veolia Environmental Trust, who are obviously distributing money on behalf of Veolia as the waste management landfill operator company. That's by far and away the most common way of getting money through the scheme, and I'll show you a bit more about that in a sec. You can also get money directly from a landfill operator, but I won't worry too much about that today because that's quite rare. The scheme is voluntary, so landfill operators don't have to participate, and that's what makes it a private scheme, which can help sometimes in terms of match funding. Even though it's 90% tax credit, it is considered a private scheme. So a bit more about these, and I will show you my screen if I can be clever. I'd have to show you a web page. So quickly on those options again. So distributive environmental bodies, aka funding environmental bodies. So they give money out from one or more landfill operators. The large ones tend to be partnered with one landfill operators, but there are some that distribute money on behalf of a few. They can have a nationwide, they can fund nationwide, like Veolia Environmental Trust, like BIFA Award, like Suez Communities Trust, the large waste management companies you've heard of, or they can just be a local focus. And they may, and most do, have their own funding criteria. There's a set criteria that are in the regulations, but funders do have their own requirements. So they may only fund certain projects, or they may only fund projects in certain areas or near their own sites. And as I clarified, enrolment as an environmental body is rarely required. So I wouldn't even think about that at this point, at this stage. Landfill operators, again, I wouldn't worry too much about that now because it's quite rare to get money direct, but there's a list available on our website, and enrolment as an EB would always be required. So when we talk about location, this is the most important thing really. Our requirement is that you have to be within 10 miles of any licensed landfill site, and we can help you find that out by contacting our helpline. But funders often have their own requirements, and they will require you in most cases to be near one of their own sites and potentially closer than the 10 miles. I'll just quickly show you our website where we have a central register of the funders. So just bear with me 2 seconds. Now, I should try and stop sharing. And then I should be able to show you just quickly. Most of our queries are about the complexity of the scheme and the confusion that comes up, because it is quite confusing. So you should just see our website now. So you go to our website, you go to the main page, you go to homepage, you go to finding funding in the middle, you go down to funder search. These are where you can find all the funders, the funding environmental bodies. So obviously I'll have a look at Warwickshire, so there's a bit of information there. Go down to country, obviously just England and Northern Ireland, England. Select your county, obviously Warwickshire. There'll only be about 4, 5, 6 for every area. So for Warwickshire, you have Derbyshire Environment Trust. That's again a bit of a confusion. They distribute money on behalf of Tarmac and other quarry companies that run landfill sites. They're called Derbyshire Environment Trust because they are run out of Derbyshire County Council. FCC Communities Foundation on behalf of FCC Landfill. Royal Society of Wildlife Trust is actually BIFA Award. BIFA Award go through that organisation, and they don't just do wildlife projects, they do they do the public amenities as well. Suez, and then Veolia Environmental Trust. So if you wanted to look at a bit more information, if you wanted to know what BIFA Award would do, you'd click on this one. Bit of information about where they fund, what they fund. In terms of location, for example, BIFA, all site projects must be within 50 miles of a BIFA operation or within 10 miles of a landfill site. So they would tell you that, but we can tell you whether you're near a 10 miles of any landfill site. So basically, to check you're eligible, you would go to the links here that provided for each funder. Then you can rule yourselves in or out quite quickly based on their criteria. So that's what we normally advise. Go to our site, go through the 5 or 6 funders, and then see whether you're eligible for their particular pot of money. Can you now see my PowerPoint, or are you still on the web page?
Still on the web page.
Okay, bear me 2 secs.
That's fine.
Let's go back. Okay. So that should be now back on our PowerPoint. Yeah, so that's pretty much what you do. You go to our webpage, check the different funders in your area, see if you're eligible, then you go through the process with them. I'll cover this very briefly, but I just wanted to mention it, that as I said, when the landfill operator gives the environmental body the donation, they get 90% back as a tax credit, but the other 10% has to be found, well, can be found by a contributing third party, where the landfill operator can request the project applicant to find that 10%. It's not match funding, because the 10% goes to the landfill operator to refund them for the make good their losses of the 10%. I'm just mentioning it now because if you are successful in applying to a landfill grant giver, this is one of the most complex areas and can cause problems further on down the line. So just consider who can be your contributing third party and finding that 10%. And it isn't match funding because it doesn't fund the project. But again, I won't dwell on that now. It's just to note, if you are lucky enough to be successful, to consider the complexities of that. So I will end. Sorry if I'm going on too much, but very quickly on what the LTIF actually funds. So there's 3 main objects which you can apply. They are quite different. So object D is public amenities, and this is where most of the money goes. And public amenities are the public parks, the public amenities like cycle paths, museums, a huge range of potential amenities, sports clubs. There's a few basic criteria of which your funder will help you go through, but we can obviously help as well. The project has to provide, maintain, or improve. That's obviously quite broad, but they're the requirements of the regulation. So you can build a new amenity, you can maintain one that exists or improve one. The site can't be run with a view to make profit. All projects must be not profit making. You can make money from admin, for example, hiring a facility or ticket sales, but as long as that money goes back to the operation of the site, that's fine. Obviously can't fulfill any party's obligation. So the LCF should be doing work that wouldn't be happening otherwise. So it's doing stuff that wouldn't be funded because it's not someone's obligation. And object D has to have public access for at least 104 days a year. Obviously most parks, woodlands are fully accessible, but ones that have closed off access has to be at least 104 days a year and can't be for specific user groups. It has to be for the general public. Some examples, as you can imagine, we have a sports facility. There has to be community facilities. So community cricket club, tennis club, community centre, bridleway footpaths. Public park, again, is a huge majority of the funds. Village green, gardens, museums, planetariums, just there to show that, you know, there's a whole range of potential uses. And as I said earlier, this is what I'm saying is the regulator, but funders will have their own requirements. E is maintenance, so repair, restoration of a religious building or structure, or building or structure of architectural or historical interest. They can be both, but they don't have to be. So you can have a church that's of historical interest, but they don't have to be. You can have one and not the other. With these, and obviously that's Coventry Cathedral, that has received money. These buildings have to be open to the general public as well, but they don't have to meet the 104-day requirement. So they can just be open for what a similar building would be open for. So for churches, maybe that's just 1 day a week, that type of thing. Because this is maintenance, repair, or restoration, you can't have any new works. So you can't have providing a new facility, because obviously it's maintaining what already exists. But in many ways, there's crossover. So if work of many churches these days operate in they're more like a community centre and a church. So sometimes it might be best to consider what object you might apply under. Again, not run with any with a view to make profit, but you can make money from charges as long as they go back in and not fulfilling any party's obligation. Again, some examples: church chapel restoration, village clock tower, windmill, war memorial. A lot of the war memorials have had money, and actually, just to make it clear that it's not just always a building, can be a structure, so a wall of historic importance. So object DA is the third of the main ones. So this is the conservation one. So providing, conserving or restoring a natural habitat, or maintaining or recovery of a species. So this is obviously the conservation projects, and the LCF does fund a lot of this work. So it has to be for a single identifiable site. We can have multi-site projects if you're doing work across lots of different areas, but they have to be connected in some way. Again, not for profit, and no obligations can be fulfilled. No public access for this DA projects, so you don't have to have any access to a site at all. But many cases there is, if it's for nature reserve and whatnot. Again, there's that crossover. Some examples: work to safeguard populations of particular species, control of non-invasive predators, restoring meadows, looking at connectivity of certain species, and land management. Obviously, planting trees, a lot of planting trees comes under all these types of projects. Object A and B are to do with restoration of land and pollution mitigation, however, very rarely used, so I won't dwell on those, but they're there. And that's it. Sorry if I rushed through that, but I know I only had 10 minutes, but I just wanted to make it clear what's out there. But if you ever have any questions, you can look on our website, call us or email us, and guide you through what is arguably quite a complicated scheme, but the money is there in all those different areas to take advantage of. And that's it for me, unless anyone has any questions.
That's fantastic, Simon. Just to move on to Veolia, if you have any questions, do pop them in the chat, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions of all of the speakers at the end as well. So thanks, Simon. That was really, although I know I limited you on time, it was really, really valuable. So thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great. So now I am going to pass on to Lizzie at the Veolia Environmental Trust.
I'll mute myself first. So let me just share my, oh, hang on, present. Sorry, I'm not the, hang on. Okay, present, there we go. There now. So, hi, I'm Lizzie, and I'm Head of Grants at the Veolia Environmental Trust. So the Trust, we're a registered charity, and we essentially minister Veolia's Participation in Landfill Communities Fund, also known as the LCF, which you've just heard about kindly from Simon, so it's great, you covered loads of it. So I'll be sharing very quickly an overview of where and what we fund before passing over to Luke, who's one of our trustees, and he'll give you a bit more of an insight into the environmental considerations we look for in applications, and hopefully some helpful advice for you to consider before you commit to making an application with us. So as Simon's mentioned, there is that requirement that all projects need to be within 10 miles of a landfill site. So we are a national funder, and projects need to be located either within 10 miles of a Veolia landfill site, which are the green circles on here, or within 5 miles of a major Veolia facility, which qualify through another landfill site. So you're still within that 10 miles of a landfill site, but not necessarily a Veolia one. And I'll show you how that kind of looks for Warwickshire shortly. The Trust, we've distributed over £93 million to improve over 2,600 community facilities and outdoor spaces since we began. So obviously it's a lot of money going out to communities. Typically we award about £1 million per quarter. And last financial year, our board awarded over 100 projects to over, which is about £4.4 million for community environmental projects. So there's a lot of great work going on there, and we try and support it as best as we can. This chart shows you kind of how that funding was split over the various types of projects we support. And you can see that the majority of the funding has gone to community buildings. We've got 3 funding schemes. 2 of these are available to environmental bodies enrolled with ENTRUST. So these are our habitat and biodiversity grants and also environmental improvement grants. So these are the schemes that are there to support the creation and maintenance of nature reserves, the reintroduction of species from butterflies to beavers. And we've done some larger projects as well, such as supporting the creation of the Northern Forest, or kind of part of that, and also the preservation of peatland, which increases our kind of national carbon store. But the majority of the funding, as you've seen, is going to community grants, and through which we support the kind of maintenance and improvement of community buildings and outdoor spaces. So that could be your community halls, your community centres, parks, play areas, that kind of thing. So in Warwickshire itself, so if you've got a project that you're thinking, oh, actually, you know, VET might be a trust that we want to apply to, the first thing you really need to consider is whether you're in an eligible area. So again, that we're talking about the green and the red circles on there, but you don't need to remember this right now because we've got a really easy postcode checker on our website. So you just type in the postcode of your project site and then it will automatically tell you whether you're eligible or not. So do that first, but please remember to put the project site postcode, not like your home address or, you know, another postcode that's nearby, because it's heartbreaking when an applicant goes through all that effort putting in an application and then it's outside of where we can fund. So please make sure project site postcode that you enter in. If we move on, so if you are in the eligible area and you're thinking, oh yes, actually, you know, I do want to make an application, where do you start? And that for us, we're kind of looking at what consultation, how you've worked with the community, you know, really, is this a project that the community really needs and you've really maximised the opportunities kind of for that community? Because you might be thinking, oh, want to do something, but then someone will have a great idea and you can improve your community building or outside space that benefits lots of different groups, and really, yeah, has the biggest impact for your community, not just kind of the users that are using it at the moment. So take that into consideration. On our website, we've got our criteria and guidance documents, and that's all there to kind of help support you through the application process. And the key things we're looking for are, again, that the project's really needed, and then it's got that public benefit, so that access for everyone and anyone to use. And then we're also looking for sustainability as well. But if you've got, I'm not going to go into the detail here because it is all on our website, and obviously every project is individual, each project's different. But if you've got any questions at all through that process, we're here to kind of help. So do ring us, you know, our contact details are on our website. I think I'll put them at the end as well, but if not, we can share them. So we can support you through that process. But in terms of sustainability, I am going to pass over to Luke, who's going to expand a bit more on kind of what we're looking for environmentally in terms of projects. So, Luke.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie. Yes, so I'm one of the trustees at the Veolia Environmental Trust, so I've only recently joined. But I just wanted to talk a bit today about the funding decisions we make as a board. So when making funding decisions for projects, I suppose we are increasingly looking at the steps communities have taken to consider and manage the environmental impacts of their projects and to cut carbon and everything. So what I've tried to provide in this diagram here, I mean, the font is a little bit small, but I just wanted to try and pack it into one slide onto one diagram. So what I'm just trying to provide here today is just a little bit of an overview of the types of things you might want to think about when developing your projects. So I think one of the common problems is people often say, like, oh, we need to make this project more renewable or green or whatever, use all the different terminology, but what does that actually mean? What can you actually practically do? So this is what I'm trying to set out in this diagram here. So suppose when it comes to a community project, whether it's a retrofit project or whether it's like a new build project, that sort of thing, in terms of where to start, you need to start with identifying what you can do. I mean, there's probably all of us here today could probably list a number of measures that we think would cut carbon, whether that's installing roof insulation, wall insulation, floor insulation, putting some solar panels on, renewable heating systems, all of this sort of stuff. But one of the biggest challenges is working out where do you start? What do you do first? What gives you your best bang for the buck? Bang for your buck, basically. Where should you begin? So in this sort of first box I've got here on the top left, the where to start. What I would say is that you may have heard this phrase somewhere, is take a fabric first approach. I mean, if you Google the term fabric first, and the idea of take a fabric first approach is you look at the actual materials which your building is made out of. You make sure you've got all the insulation in place before you go sticking solar panels on the roof and that sort of thing. You need to make sure that there's no point putting renewable energy sort of stuff on a leaky building. Make sure the actual fabric, sort of fabric first approach. Something as well to note as well, and this isn't really something that needs funding, but it's all part of showing that you've considered the environmental impact of projects, is consider the behavioural side of things as well as the physical changes. So I used to do energy efficiency audits on community buildings a number of years back now. And one of the most common things, we go into community buildings and sometimes find that, and look at like the program of events on that particular day, and we find out there was a yoga class in the evening for 1 hour, and then we look at the heating program, and the heating's programmed to be on like for 15 hours a day. It's those sort of things that is really important to look at, and you can manage and cut carbon and also save money through that as well. So it's really important to develop an understanding of what actions you could take and then in what order. And the way you might go about that, you might take some form of self-assessment of your building. So just looking and thinking about the different levels of insulation you've got in place. And there's places you can go to for advice. So I've put a couple of starter websites down here. So Energy Savings Trust is a really good one, and there are some links more through to community building sections. Simple energy advice. So this is where the government is currently putting a lot of its more energy advice onto. It's got more of a domestic focus than a community buildings focus, I have to say. But there's still some transferable information, definitely, and ideas of what you could do. So those are good places to look into. And what I was now going to move down to the bottom yellow box I've got on this page. So when you're identifying what you could do with your project, it's really important to use the support of your community. So harness the enthusiasm in your community for climate change action. So as Lizzie mentioned, one of the things we always look for when reviewing projects is making sure that the community is engaged. And this is a way that you can do it. So I would recommend looking for individuals with expertise in auditing or buildings expertise, but also just a general enthusiasm in climate change action and that sort of thing. Just really try to harness that potential in your community. You might have someone on your project team who can lend a critical ear at each stage of the project to make sure you're thinking about all the different renewable alternatives and that sort of thing. And now I'm just going to move across to a bit more like the delivery side of things. So these green boxes here. So the top box and the top green box here. I think when installing renewable measures, so whether it's insulation, solar panels, renewable heating systems, all this stuff, it's quite new to most people. It's new to a lot of us. And it might feel much more comfortable going into a building and like, oh, we'll just replace the gas boiler with another gas boiler. That might feel a much more easier route to go down. But there's real strength, there's real benefits for going for a renewable alternative that's a bit out of perhaps your areas of knowledge. So as well as looking for individuals with expertise, it's important to make sure you get what you pay for as well in this area as well. I mean, like many sectors, there are some cowboys who operate within the renewable space, unfortunately. So what I put down here is I've just flagged a couple of quality schemes, standard schemes that are out there. So you've got the Micro Generation Certification Scheme, bit of a mouthful, or MCS is often the logo you see. And this covers small scale renewable electricity and low carbon heat installations. And what this means is you can go on their website, you can find an installer, you can find a product that's being vetted and comes under them. So that means that installer has been assessed against certain standards. And also, if anything does go wrong, it gives you a route of recourse for a route of action to take installers to task, basically. And then Trustmark is a similar one for insulation as well. So you can also investigate that as well. And also, I think one of the opportunities really to highlight on the delivery side as well is if you are going to install some more renewable measures, you've got the potential to unlock additional funding. That sort of like installing those types of measures might allow you to unlock additional funding, whether that's from Veolia or elsewhere, for example. So it's really important so you can look into that sort of things as well. So at a UK-wide level, so my day job is more working on UK level sort of grants. To be honest, for community buildings, it's a bit more limited. There's a lot of government support programs out there that focus either on the domestic stuff or they focus on big non-domestic stuff and community buildings, and those smaller non-domestic and are sometimes a bit left out in the middle. So I would look into that. The Energy Savings Trust does provide some advice on that. But there's also more community, county level schemes out there which may be able to support your projects and well. So yeah, definitely look into that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you for listening today. And as Lizzie said, if you've got any questions for us today or after the meeting even, please feel free to get in contact with us. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Luke. That was really, I think, useful across all of the funders that are talking today. I'm sure would agree that's really useful information and insights, and as you said, sort of local opportunities and national when we're looking at sort of heart of England, Severn, Trent, all of the people who are joining us today against sort of the National Lottery as well, and Warwickshire County Council as well. So it's great to see you discuss the importance of that, and we're lucky to be joined by an array of different groups there. So that's really fantastic. So thank you. So next we are going to pass over to Jenny from Heart of England to talk about the Community Energy Warwickshire Fund.
Hi. Let's put my screen on. Does that come on? Okay, thank you. I'm one of the grants officers at the Heart of England Community Foundation, and I've been invited to talk particularly today about the Community Energy Warwickshire scheme. Community Energy Warwickshire is a volunteer-run community benefit society set up in 2010 with the aim to invest in renewable energy projects and to help local people reduce their energy usage and save money. Its public share offers have raised enough capital to buy solar panels that have been installed at 3 NHS hospitals in South Warwickshire, and these are still owned and operated by the society. They generate further income from the sale of electricity and the feed-in tariff from the national grid, and provide the hospitals with discounted electricity. And also from this income, the society set up a charitable fund which has been administered by us for the last 7 years. The society's aims are to support the development and installation of renewable energy projects, encourage the sustainable use of energy and reductions in carbon, and raise public awareness of environmental issues and support educational initiatives. Grants of up to £2,000 are available to community groups in Warwickshire, Coventry and Solihull that fall into one of these categories. Insulation and other energy efficiency improvements to homes and community buildings. Bursaries for training in ways to improve energy efficiency of homes, either through technical improvements to building fabric or advice on the use of energy to building users. Running events, workshops or surgeries where people can get advice on ways to improve energy efficiency and reduce energy use. And the provision of one-to-one support to help vulnerable people to keep warm and energy efficient homes. So I'll give you some examples of the grants that we've awarded. The Studley Sports and Social Club received £2,000 to replace a boiler and a control system that was over 30 years old. A new zonal control valve allows them now to heat separate rooms, making it more efficient and cost effective, rather than having to heat the whole building as before. St Chad's Church Community Hall received £2,000 to replace old fluorescent lighting in the community hall with a new LED system. Hello. This is more energy and cost efficient and includes a sensory switch to further improve efficiency. Lighthorn Allotment Association received £500 to buy a 1,300 litre capacity water butt to save water for use by allotment members, and which will also reduce the amount of mains water used. Oxhall Village Hall received £640 to install a new kitchen water heater as part of a wider refurbishment scheme. And Coventry Ames received £1,000 towards the cost of educational workshops for mental health service users to promote energy efficiency, including ways to save energy, switch energy suppliers, and understand smart meters. So how do you apply? Well, like some of the other funders here, applications are made online and application forms are available via our website. You need to register using your email address, and then you get links to the applications that you want to use. On our website, we advertise all the open grants. There are about 14 or 16 at the moment, and each, including the Community Energy Warwickshire, has a specific fund fact sheet which gives the aims of the fund and that particular fund's criteria. We also have an essential information area, which I strongly recommend you look at before starting an application. And as well as the application form itself, applicants must send several supporting documents, including things like the most recent annual accounts, equal opportunities policy, and safeguarding policy. And if you're applying for capital items over £300, you'd also need to send 3 quotations. But a complete list of the supporting documents needed and all the further information you might need can be found in the fund fact sheet or in the essential information area. There's no deadline for this particular fund. It's a rolling programme at the moment, so you can apply at any time. Once we receive an application, there's an assessment process during which time applicants might be contacted for some clarification. And at the minute, it's taking us up to about 10 weeks from receiving an application to letting you know whether your application's been successful or not. It makes our job much easier if applicants can be concise and specific and clearly describe the why, the how, the where, the when, and how much. If you receive a grant, you'll be required to send a report to us when it's finished, telling us how you spent the money and what difference it has made. And here are our contact details. We're mainly all still working from home, so the best way to contact us at the moment is via the email address, which you can see there, or through our website. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. So again, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll collate all of those at the end and run them by all of the speakers. So that was fantastic. Thank you, Jenny, for sharing that information. So next up, we have got Matt Cox from the National Lottery Community Fund to talk about Together for Our Planet.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Phoebe. The sun's come round while we've all been sitting here, so thankfully I'll be presenting something rather than having to look at me, because I think I'm blinded enough. It's probably shining off my forehead like you wouldn't believe. So good afternoon. Good to see so many of you here today. My name is Matt Cox. I am from the National Lottery Community Fund, which up until the beginning of 2019 was the big lottery fund. Hopefully it's been long enough now for that name change to actually have got across to most people. But the clear difference is that we now have the words the National Lottery included in our name, the key thing being that that's where our money comes from, and that link wanted to be more clear to the world at large. I am the local funding officer within the fund for our main grant scheme, Reaching Communities, which is for grants above £10,000. Our smaller grant scheme, Awards for All, I'm sure you've heard of as well. And as the local funding officer, I cover South Warwickshire as far as Warwickshire is concerned. I have colleagues that cover the Solihull area and North Warwickshire and Rugby. But I am here today not as your local member of staff for South Warwickshire, but to tell you about, because of the environmental focus today, to tell you about a scheme that the fund is currently running called Together for Our Planet, which has a very specific environmental focus. Now, the presentation that I've got is actually a PDF of a PowerPoint, which was something that was put together for a webinar that the people actually involved with this scheme had in September. So I am not Liz Watchorn, just to make that clear. That name there, that does not relate to me. I am Matt Cox. And as this is something that was put together for a far longer webinar, there'll be probably quite a few slides here that I will skip through. This, you know, as the name might suggest, was, or sorry, as the date at the bottom there might suggest, was something that was launched in September and remains active for the moment. There's a little bit of background information here, just seeing as I am representing the National Lottery Community Fund, about the Community Fund. I'm sure either as Big Lottery or as the National Lottery Community Fund, you're all aware of the fund. It is the largest community activity funder in the country, but only one of 12 distributors of money that is raised by people buying National Lottery tickets. We are the ones that award 40% of that good causes money. There's some figures here about the numbers of grants that were awarded in the period that obviously the team were able to pull together for their webinar. Not necessarily very up to date, but obviously it's fairly large amounts of money. As a funder, we have our own environment strategy. There are 3 elements to it, as it says there. One is to continue to improve ourselves. One, more importantly for you, is that we very much want to support charities and community groups in the sector at large to continue to manage and improve their own environmental impact. And then, as a very dedicated element of us doing this, we have a 10-year-long fund called the Climate Action Fund, which has 100 million dedicated to it. That again is not what I'm here to talk about today. This is something that is running on an annual basis. I believe this year the scheme opened to applications in February, closed to applications in April. So it's not actually open at the moment. However, as it's a 10-year fund, so it's only the 2nd year this year, it will be opening again towards the beginning of next year. So if you have an interest in looking into that, it's to do with projects that are specifically linked to dealing with impacts of climate change, then you're welcome to go to our website. I'll give you the website address later on to find out a little bit more about that. But as I say, that's not currently open, nor what we're here for today. That page is in here twice for some reason. The Together for Our Planet Fund is what we're going to talk about. This is completely tied in with the government's Together for Our Planet initiative. Should mention that if it's not clear already, as distributors of National Lottery funding, that is something that is actually overseen by DCMS. So we are an arm's length governmental body, and therefore it makes perfect sense that when the government comes up with an initiative such as Together for Our Planet, there's the potential for a fund to be created to actually award money that links in with that. And very specifically, with the Conference of the Parties happening in Glasgow at the beginning of November, this is time-wise, at least to some extent, linked in with that. I don't know to what extent people know about the Conference of the Parties. I must admit, maybe I'm alone in this, I didn't know too much until I did a bit of research more recently, but it is obviously to do with world leaders coming together to talk about the impacts of climate change and what the world is going to do about that. So this fund links in time-wise and theme-wise with that. It's a national campaign, but projects can be very local, but it is a small grants campaign, fund, sorry, just from £1,000 up to £10,000 for projects. Obviously, that means there could be a fair few hundred projects funded through it. Groups have 12 months in which to spend the money that they might potentially receive as a part of this. Because obviously the COP event takes place at the beginning of November, even though some awards may have been granted already by then, we're obviously expecting most of them most of the events or activities that are going to be funded to take place after the COP26 event. Timeline of what's been going on, as I say, it did open in September. More importantly, applications for this fund closed at the end of the working day on the 18th of November. So there's still a good few weeks left for this. The the COP26 event happens at the beginning of November, so it is possible to get, possibly not now, but people perhaps put applications in September to actually do things to tie in very much with that event. And as it says at the bottom there, that the turnaround is relatively quick. So even though it only opened at the beginning of September, at some point in October, some awards will be announced. And that is then rolling through until that has all been, all the funding has been awarded. It does so within 12 weeks. Clearly September to October is not 12 weeks, so they're having to turn quite a few round much quicker than that. It could take longer, dependent on the number of applications as well. It's possibly a bit late, as I say now, but it does say there that if any group did want to apply for activities they were intending to carry out during the period that COP26 is happening, then it's worth getting in touch with the team that are running this particular fund first. And maybe if this, I haven't even got to the point where this presentation tells you anything about what this fund actually is necessarily for, if potentially you're going to be interested in it, and I'm sure this comes up later on as well, this email address, that is the contact address for this particular fund, Together for Our Planet, at tnlcommunityfund.org.uk. So actually the important stuff, what is this fund about? It's about things that matter to communities. It could be linked to any of those items there: food, transport, energy, waste and consumption, natural environment. That's probably not an exhaustive list, but they may be, they're going to be the most obvious themes. As it says, you don't need to be, as a group, an expert in any of those areas or have any previous experience, but what you might want to do just needs to meet the requirements of this particular fund. Application is going to be prioritised from the groups that are mentioned there, those hit hardest by climate change, those who are actually thinking about taking climate action. Quite important, I think, with this scheme, because it's a small scale scheme, it's quite keen to be assisting groups that are not regularly funded through the community fund, or perhaps if they have had grants in the past, haven't got one currently, and certainly looking at smaller organisations, those with an annual turnover of under 100,000. The who can apply is pretty much the same as who can usually apply for awards for all region communities and other National Lottery Community Fund grants. I won't necessarily read out that list, but it's probably going to cover pretty much everybody here today. This now gets into some detail, which we haven't probably got the time for, about who and how, and so that's two organisations that apply, and this is the same with our usual schemes, have to have at least two trustees. They have to not be related, not live at the same address, be completely unconnected, and obviously we're going to ask for accounts and so on. We're going to need to know about your bank account. This goes into much more detail than we need today. But there are three key questions any group would need to answer. What do you want to do? How has that involved your community? And how does it meet at least two of these 5 funding criteria? I'm going to skip on to the next page, because each of these then comes with some examples of what that means. So you need to be meeting 2 of these 5 criteria. So supporting the development of longer term climate action. Could be piloting things, carrying out a series of events across the 12-month period that the funding would be available to you for, some educational work perhaps. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, these are just some examples. You need to be potentially encouraging communities to plan for what is the climate emergency, considering climate action, why it matters to this particular community. So putting together some climate action plans, feasibility studies, doing some community-led research and community consultation, very much about the community being involved. Celebrating the importance of community-led climate action, getting more people involved, so awareness raising activities and projects, things that celebrate how people are coming together to take climate action, and possibly that might be a digital activity to raise awareness and again get more people involved. Building resilience in communities that have actually been quite badly hit by climate change or are likely to be. So the development of skills, climate adaptation projects, improving access to nature, or looking at mental health support that goes alongside climate education. And then finally, of these 5, 2 of which each project needs to be meeting. The 5th one is providing job skills or training opportunities within this sphere. So training opportunities, skills related to energy advice, retrofitting, the reuse of materials or items, and repair, growing things, skills related to such an activity. Carbon sequestration is now the phrase I need to look up, because I can't tell you what that is, but apparently it could be tree planting and peat bogs. And then training courses, being more literate about carbon, and talking about climate change and so on, the things that I'm not necessarily very good at doing myself currently. As I said, this is a list of examples rather than an exhaustive list of what you actually must absolutely be hitting on the head. But the 2 important things, as it mentions at the bottom there, got to be related to climate action, otherwise this is not the scheme for you, and must be community-led, which is pretty much standard for community fund projects, but important to know that it's part of this here. There's some examples of things that have been funded by the fund through other funding schemes of ours, grant schemes of ours, not obviously as yet through this Together for Our Planet fund. You can have a little look at those, but again, we haven't really got the time to go into this in any detail today. Within this wider topic, what can actually be funded? So events and activities, equipment and materials, staff costs that are proportionate to the actual activity involved in it, so not just your core costs to run your organisation, but things that are related specifically to the activity that meets the Together for Our Planet fund criteria. Training costs, transport costs related to the project, but not a trip up to Glasgow to the actual COP26 event. Utilities, running costs, again related to the project, volunteer expenses, costs associated perhaps with delivering it in other languages. And also potentially small land or building projects. Obviously this is only up to £10,000, so it's always going to be pretty small if you're talking about what you can achieve land or building wise with that sort of money. Unlikely to be funded, again, not an exhaustive list, but where the whole thing is about capital, that is probably not likely to be funded with this particular scheme. Broader environmental projects like litter picking, for example, that's not specifically linked to climate change, maybe right for us as a funder in general, but not for the Together for Our Planet scheme. Things that would happen inside school anyway as part of the curriculum, not going to be right for this. Technical climate solutions that are perhaps in no way community led or involved, that's not what this is about. And one-off events, it's not about a single activity, it's about something that hopefully will run through most, if not all, of that 12-month period that the grant is available for. I can take some questions now, or we could leave it till we're all done, but there again is the email address for this particular scheme. And what I will say is, as I mentioned at the top, I'm not involved in this scheme, but I am one of your local funding officers. Specifically, I'm the Warwick district and Stratford district funding officer, so it's only that part of the county I cover. But if you want to get in touch with me, I can put you in touch with my colleagues. My email address is Matthew, 2 T's, MATTHEW.Cox, and then the same end bit there at tnlcommunityfund.org.uk. Having said that, if you do want to talk about this particular fund, as you may have guessed as I was going through this, you probably want to email this rather than me, because I'll just give you gobbledygook. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Matt. You've undersold yourself. That was really useful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to our final fund for this event, we are going to be hearing from Sue about the Severn Trent Community Fund.
Hi everybody, hopefully you can see my screen.
So
yes.
Yeah, that's good to go. Right, so the Severn Trent Community Fund was launched in January 2020, so last year, just before the world went crazy. So it's been a very difficult and strange few years, 18 months, but we've got there. And it's a commitment for the next 5 years of £10 million. The fund isn't just for 5 years, it's as a business, we do a 5-year business plan, so it sort of gets reviewed, and next year we'll be looking at what we'll be doing for the 5 years after that. The fund itself is around community wellbeing, but because we have 3 main aims, which are people, place and environment, it obviously fits well with today. So the projects are, the fund is split up into 3 amounts, so it's 2 to 10,000 and 10 75, 200. I'll give a bit more on that in a minute. But we're looking for projects that are around, for the environmental aspect, projects that are looking at our environment and how we can look after it, and obviously look after the water as well. Obviously we're a water company, so we would love to see applications that have a link and connection to water, but it is not essential. Environmental projects tend to have a natural link to water, so we do see more really obvious links to water coming through with them, like grey water recycling or creating efficient sort of water systems and sustainable drainage. But in the people and place ones, it might necessarily not be such a strong link. We can't accept any applications that are too closely linked to our core business. So anything like a new connection to water on an allotment, for example, or new drainage, we can't fund because it's potentially money that could come back into the business. Who can apply? So obviously it's the usual normal suspects, as I would say. So anybody that's not for profit, and as long as you've got a governing document and a bank account, that's what we would ask you for at point of application. So obviously that includes things like the guys have already said from the other funders, charities, community interest companies, companies limited by guarantee. We do fund schools and local authorities and parish councils and sports clubs. Any project has to be based within the Severn Trent region, and obviously you guys all are, and it must be for the benefit of Severn Trent customers, and we can only accept 1 application from an organisation at any time. Like I said, there's 3 grant sizes, so there's 2 to 10,000, which is anything up to 12 months, 10 to 75,000, which again is for projects up to 12 months, but to apply for anything over 10,000, you do need to be a registered body, so that would be a charity or a company. And you do need to provide 10% financial match funding, and that does need to be financial. It can't be in kind or donate, so it needs to be from your free reserves or from another funder. And then there's 75,000 up to 200,000, which is projects up to 24 months. We do need to be the majority funder, so that would be looking at 51% or more of your total project cost. But if you are doing a large scale project, then you would maybe look at how you phase that project. So if you're not sure, you can always talk to me about it. So we have funded projects that have been, and overall the whole project is more, but a phase of it has been for Severn Trent. Now, I thought I'd give a few examples of the sort of things that we funded environmentally wise so far, but there's a link on this presentation that will take you through to our story maps, which gives you a really good overview of what we funded so far. You can put your postcode in and it will tell you if there's been a project near you. And if you're interested in just this Warwickshire area, for example, you could just click on the Warwickshire map. But these are a few examples of sort of things that have got the environmental link to it. So we funded a project in Derby that was reclaiming, I'm trying to think of the word for it. It was an abandoned allotment space, basically. And they've created an accessible allotment with level paths and various types of raised beds, polytunnels and rainwater harvesting for access by a disability charity base there. And it's an amazing space. I was very lucky to go and see it earlier this year, and it really has made a difference. It's improved the local environment. They're working to look at the biodiversity for the area as well. So it's a really good project, on top of the fact that the well-being it's creating for the people that join in is brilliant. We also funded a project in Birmingham through Sustainable Life, which was
to bring a really disused heritage woodland back to life, and back to being safe for the public to use. And it's obviously really improved the natural habitats and ecosystem there. And then a really different one is Beneley Viaduct in Nottinghamshire. It's a really amazing old viaduct that links Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire across the Erewash Valley. It was going to get pulled down in the 60s, and it was saved. It's now being renovated as a raised walkway and cycle route. I believe we're very close to opening it, which is really exciting. And we funded the creation of a wildlife trail underneath what is locally called the Iron Giant. It's an amazing structure. If you're ever up that way, it's worth a stop to have a look. It's creating the habitats underneath. It's each of the pillars as you go underneath it, they sort of naturally create different kind of habitats. And there's an amazing row of apple trees along there, which have self-seeded from when the trains used to go over and the drivers used to throw their apple cores out the window. Or passengers, it could have been passengers, but the story is it was the drivers. So anyway, they're the kind of things that we've, just a quick example of the sort of things that we have funded so far, but we've done loads of community gardens, forest schools, sustainable drainage, all sorts of things. So if you're not sure, have a chat to us. That's the main community fund email address, but I am the community fund officer for the Warwickshire area, so you can have my details at the end. We can't, there's a quick list here of what we can't fund. It's all the usual, so it's not, we can't fund individuals, or like I've already said, anything that's close to our core services. They do need to be for new projects. We can't fund running costs, but we will fund proportionate to the project any costs. And again, like I said about being the majority funder, projects need to be within the Severn Trent region, and unfortunately we don't fund anything that's short-term or one-off events or retrospective. And it can't be to the detriment of Severn Trent. So, for example, we had somebody wanting to do pop-up swimming pools over the summer, which would use quite a lot of water. So that's not something we can do. But there's a full list of ineligible costs on our website. And how to apply. It's an online application system through our portal. The link is here, and there's some really good information on there. We've got a really good guidance document that we've constantly update with any feedback we get from applicants. And this is where you would make your application. If you want more detail on how to apply for the funding, and I've got a really comprehensive document of how to apply. So just ask the guys at CAVA and we can send that through to you, because we are limited on time today. And coming soon, so from a real environmental aspect, as a company, Severn Trent are the official partners with the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, and we're the natural and carbon neutral supporter. So as part, our commitment is to offset the carbon of the Games and make it the first ever carbon neutral Commonwealth Games. Obviously it's a challenge, but we're planting 72 tiny forests across the region to give that, the trees will then interact and reduce combat the carbon neutral, and various other schemes like water bars to reduce plastic waste and all of that kind of thing. And it's a massive piece of work that's going on within the company as a whole. But in November, we'll be launching full details on this, but we're going to be refocusing the fund in February to be a specific environmental based focus, and it's around environmental sustainability and offsetting carbon across the Severn Trent region. And it is across the Severn Trent region, it's not just Birmingham. Although the Commonwealth Games obviously are in Birmingham, there's also sites elsewhere across the region that the games will be ran in. And also we're just opening it up to everybody who is our customer. But up until then, you can still apply as normal. And so the dates are here for that, for our submission dates. Anything under 10,000, we look at on a more regular basis. Anything over 10,000, we look at once a quarter. So these are the submission dates, excuse me, you'll need for that. And just look out for the new fund for the Commonwealth Games coming soon. It's going to be a really exciting sort of fund. We're refocusing it to be around water saving, recycling, and carbon neutral, saving carbon energy. So, and it's going to be a slightly different process with how the application is judged and awarded. So that's all going to be coming soon. I can't say too much. I feel like I'm on one of those programs where you're not allowed to give the details, but yes, that's coming soon, and my contact details are there if anybody needs them. So hopefully that was a quick whistle stop and we're back on track for time, hopefully.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Sue. Thank you so much. It's great to hear about the changes that are coming up with Commonwealth Games as well. So now it is time for questions. I keep saying at the end it will be time, and here we are. I will just say before we take questions that Veolia have a few questions to ask some participants of this workshop as a sort of consultation that we'll do after this set of questions. If you'd be happy to stay and answer them, that would be fantastic. With Lizzie, and I will stay as well. So do we have any questions for any of the speakers?
There's been nothing in the chat, Phoebe, so far.
Okay, anybody feeling brave and want to ask a question and take themselves off mute? It's been a lot of information, so if you do come up with any questions, all of the information will be shared with everybody. So and everyone, as they've said, they're all very friendly and they're all here to help. So if you come up with anything, do feel free. I'll be sharing their contact information after this session as well. Matt's shared the link for the Together for Our Planet.
Yeah, I realised I'd completely forgotten to actually share the specific web address for the scheme that I've been banging on about. So yes, I popped it in the chat there for you all.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I'll share all of that information if nobody has any questions right now. Of course, all of us at CAVA are here as well. More generally, the sort of support we can offer with funding, we can proofread applications. If you are looking at this funding and want to widen your funding search, let us know and we can do some further research into other available funders if you need some support, perhaps identifying which landfill funders through the ENTRUST website or anything like that. Just let us know and we can support with that as well. So yeah, so if there's no questions, those of you who are happy to stay and chat with Lizzie about the Veolia fund and doing some consultation about that, it'd be great if you would stick around. But otherwise, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, then.
Thanks, Phoebe.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And don't forget to fill out the State of the Sector survey as people are leaving.
Bye.
Hopefully we'll have some people staying to chat.